Alright, I'm back again, Metal Levite Alex with Monster Hunter World, but we're not gonna do what I've been doing for the past 80 to 90 or so parts of this game. This time, I'm gonna be doing something different. This entire part, which is gonna be relatively brief compared to everything else, is gonna be a review portion of the game. Now, normally with the past games that I've played through, I normally would do the review at the very end, but considering the massive size of this game, I kind of wanted to put it at its own part, you know what I mean? So yeah, a little bit of a backstory. Monster Hunter, for those who are just catching up, I've never played an MH game until this one. But I've always wanted to. I've always kind of liked the games from a conceptual standpoint. Like, you got dragons, dinosaurs, or dinosaur-based monsters and other stuff. And so, it's pretty much like a fantasy game. It's pretty much a fantasy game, but with a much more, I guess you could say, quasi-grounded take. And as the game says, you play as a monster hunter who goes around accepting quests, and you're pretty much studying these things and either capturing them, killing them, and, of course, you go and make better shit out of them. And so, yeah, I saw the first game on the shelf, never got it. I really want to now, but over the years, the series has more or less gone along and mostly on handhelds from the PSP to the DS, and at one point with the third game, the Nintendo Wii. Yes, I'm sorry, but a Monster Hunter game on the Nintendo Wii with those controls, yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. Oh, and apparently the second game was released on PS2, but it was never released in the West except on PSP, which is kind of a bummer. And the fourth game didn't have a console release at all. It was a DS game. But fast forward, and now we have I guess the fifth major game, this one, World. And so this one is pretty much my gateway game to the series, and having completed the main story, I gotta say, it was well worth the price of admission. Consider me no longer just a conceptual fan, but a full-on board fan at this point. Now, yeah, that's the main story of the game is pretty much you're going to a new continent that is different from the previous one in the old games. It's new and it's unexplored, new monsters, including some old ones that return. And the variety is insane. Like, you've got not just dragon-based monsters that breathe fire, but dinosaur-based ones with powers. The variety is insane. And unlike your typical action game or action RPG game like this, you don't really fight so much any minion monsters, except a few cases. For the most part, the game is all bosses. Oh yeah, Xeno'jiiva, the final main Elder Dragon of the game, pre-DLC. As you can see, there's a whole variety of them. Like this one, Anjanathi, kind of looks like a T-Rex, just with fire breath and nostrils. Odo Garen, which is like a big red undead dog-looking thing. And there's the flagship monster, Rathalos, been in the series since the beginning. And of course, Elder Dragons, which are the supreme monsters of the series. And they all have different weak points that you can go for that yield different rewards. And it's just very deep. You got the studying. You can have this guy make plants for you to harvest for power-ups like health or stamina boosts. And a melder here who I honestly never used much. And as far as assignments are concerned, the game is both drop-in, drop-out, co-op multiplayer, so you can tackle this game with your friends. And that's been a thing that's been a mainstay trait with all of the Monster Hunter games. And it is a hard game. It really is. There were many points throughout the game where I did get very frustrated at how difficult. Honestly, I've not played a game this hard since Ninja Gaiden on the Xbox, all honestly. I mean, yeah, there's been Dark Souls and Bloodborne, but I haven't really gotten into those. So this has been probably the most legitimately challenging game I've played since. And you can join online sessions, SOSs, where people pretty much call for help in missions they're having trouble with. And we're divided into several parts. There's the main missions, which sadly you can't go and replay. But there's also optionals, which you can replay. But probably the ones you really want to do in between main and optionals is the investigations. And those yield even more rewards, depending on how you do and whether or not you survive that long. And these are the guys that do it. You can do deliveries. Well, I've pretty much completed all the ones that I can, which give me more money and resources. This is where we find them. Now you have to go out into the field to investigate monsters. These are bounties, which you can use to get even more points and power-ups. Now what you do. Now here we're in the main base, Astera, and there's a secondary research base, which you unlock later. But the game is divided into, like, different zones of many different types. And I'll show off a little bit of one, just to see what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, here's one. This is one nitpick I really do have of the game. The loading times, they can be very long, almost to a laughable degree. Like 2018, and we still don't have games with loading that takes less than 5 seconds. So there are times where you'll be waiting for a particularly long time for no reason, which can get irksome. It's not a big negative, but it is something to be aware of if you're an impatient gamer like I am sometimes. I mean, I do have patience, but even there's so much patience I can do. And so, yeah, there's like several distinct zones that all have their own little sub-areas you can go in. There's our handler who handles our quest givings, item box, tent we can rest in. And this little guy, in case you're wondering, is a palico, or feline. And he's pretty much your main assistant throughout the game. Unless you join up with a bunch of people in which you have to depend on others. As you can see, it's a full-on thriving environment, and honestly, I have not seen any video game that has done living ecosystems as well as this game does. You've got the herbivores here, you've got carnivores that sometimes pop up and start going after them, and we're in free exploration mode, which means you can pretty much go about and do as you want, although some monsters will decide to leave given enough time. And those are scout flies, which highlight different stuff in the environment, like pickups or power-ups that grow out here naturally, and occasionally you'll find the traces of other monsters to hunt, in this case an Anjanath. And just to demonstrate the combat, what I have here is an insect glaive, which is mostly supposed to be a support. It's a mix of a support weapon and a frontal attack weapon, and it comes in different varieties of power-ups, namely with the insect attached to my arm, as you see. I have a pseudocanth, and its special ability is it creates clouds of flies that allows me to blast things, like explosions. Other ones I have include health and poison. And the combat is very methodical. It's not really supposed to be button mashed. And this extends to not just this, but every other weapon in the game. And there's a huge amount of different enemy weapon types throughout the game that you can experiment with. Me personally, I prefer the glaive, the charge axe, the switch axe, and to some degree the... and to some light degree the great sword, which is a big-ass sword. And then throughout the game, you earn not cash on the right, zenny, which is your main spending currency, and research points from, you know, researching and investigating all the stuff out in the field you find, like the tracks I found. And that's how you can afford, for the most part, different stuff throughout the game, with the exception of weapons, of course. Zenny you have to use. You can't use research points for that. For weapons and armor, you have to spend hard-earned cash. And you gotta be... and unless you're planning on going after every quest in the game, you're gonna run out of money fast if you go for a particular thing that's expensive, and you're gonna have to grind and do it all over again. And speaking of grind, how the game works is that you go out, you hunt monsters, and you have the option, depending on the quest, either killing them, which is standard, or capturing them, meaning you capture them alive, which, at least in the investigative quests, bigger rewards. Now, you can hunt, in regular hunt quests, you can do both. However, it's with capture quests where you can only do, well, the capturing part. And this is the Smithy, where you go and either buy or build your different armor sets and weapons, and you can change your equipment, and to some degree even customize it, at least in terms of coloration, which you unlock throughout the game. And yeah, you have a huge amount of different weapons, from great swords to long swords. And me personally, when I started the game, including the beta, I originally was trying to be a great sword or warhammer person. But as I went through the game, I ended up finding other weapons I just gravitated more to, and the insect glaive was the one that I ended up using mostly because of its air ability. Most of the time, you're on the ground. The only way you can really jump in the game is by jumping off of ledges or sliding down hills, whereas this is the only one that allows you to jump onto monsters, which you can do if the game allows it from time to time. Got charms for extra benefits, different armor sets from various monsters that you find, and if you're a collector hog, you're gonna have a lot of busy moments with this game, and it all comes in different varieties and in tiers. And like the weapons, you have to go and get the pieces of monsters from ones you go out and find out or hunt. And it kind of goes by like a loot system where, depending on what parts of the monster you break, like severing their tail or cracking armor on their faces or breaking wings, you get certain parts for rewards on a greater frequency. And early in the game, you start off with like low grade assignments, but after a while you get high grades, and high grades is where everything really starts going harder. Like, the game starts off, feels tough, but as you get used to it, it all becomes second nature, and the game gets harder as it goes along. But it's not impossible. It's hard. It's harder than a Tyrannosaurus ballsack at times, which meant I had to go and get people to help me. But overall, once you beat all the monsters, you find satisfying. And the hardest ones in the game are the Elder Dragons. They are the big bosses of the series. You think fighting dragons in other games is easy? Well, nope, not in this game. In this game, dragons are the apex monsters, and they are supremely difficult to fight. Some more so than others. And over here, we got the canteen where he makes us food. And this you have to do with almost every big hunt. Otherwise, you're going to be super low on health and stamina, and you're going to die a lot. There's also a gathering hub where you go and do optional fights, but I never really bothered with that much. And of course, we have, as you go through the game, you get your own place, and it gets continually better over time. And of course, being a hunting game, you don't just go out and fight the big beasts. No, you can, if you want, capture various wildlife and make them pets. As you can see, I've got stuff like a shepherd hare, a downy drake over there, which is a very rare creature. That took me a while. These little hummingbird things called called coral birds, I think. And even fish. You can even catch fish like in Legend of Zelda, which is pretty satisfying, especially if you find some of the rare ones, like that guy, the petricanth, the one with the glowing spots, which is pretty much a reference to the real life coelacanth. And there's this one, which is one of my personal favorites. Kind of looks like an Archaeopteryx. And yeah, with your Palico, you can upgrade him too, like you would yourself. He has his own equipment also. His own melee weapon, helmet, body thing, and as you can see, I kind of have mine a little mixed and matched. Mostly because I kind of wanted to see his facial expressions throughout the game. And he has different upgrades too that you eventually find from meeting other feline tribes throughout the game, called the Grimalkines. And let me give him back his Nero Gigante helmet, who's one of the main... He's pretty much the flagship dragon of the game. He was heavily promoted in all the trailers, and he was, for me anyway, a pain in the ass to fight until very recently, where I started getting more used to him. And at the beginning of the game, you can customize your character's appearance. It has one of the... I would say, next to Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect, it has one of the best, or at least one of the more deeper character facial customizations. Now, you can't change your appearance completely yet. The director did say that if it was demanded enough, they would input the feature, but so far that hasn't happened. And you could, of course, you choose male or female. And it has multiple save slots, 3. I only have 1, so you can always make another character if you will, which I plan to do in the future. So that way I can do the male version and see what the armor is like for him. See, I got different outfits from the different monsters, and the different colors indicate what tier they are. Orange being the most powerful, purple and blue being the below that, and of course, further down you get white, which is the generic, the low rank. And you don't just use weapons, you got charms, you got tools like these ghillie suits, which all have different perks to give you. And having just beat the main game, I now have multiple slots I can use if I wish. Which I will do right now, actually. And so, yeah, this is a game that pretty much is addicting in terms of its rewards. Like, there's so many weapons and options and armor choices to choose from. It's pretty much loot heavy, but it's very fair in terms of how you do it. Some weapons and armor do take longer than others, but for the most part, depending if you play your cards right, choose the right assignments, you're going to be doing very well. And as for the monsters themselves, not only is there a huge variety, they all fight differently and have their own powers. The Rathalos will fly. The Radaban, which is a ground-based monster, covers itself in bones as armor. The Odogaron, which is that red dog one from before, uses speed. And being that this is a game where pretty much your main enemies are boss monsters, technically. You gotta think and be smart about how you do it. This is not a game to button mash. It really isn't. And visually, the game looks pretty good, even by today's standards. The only gripe I have is that from a distance, the frame rate can get a little stuttery. Like some monsters that would move normally close to you would start to stutter a bit in the distance. But for the most part, it doesn't harm the game that much. And it also, since I'm playing this on the PlayStation Pro, I'm able to choose between different graphics settings. Like, do I want to make the graphics themselves be emphasized? Do I want the resolution emphasized, the frame rate, so on and so forth. So that gives you a huge amount of options as to what you want to do and how you want to play. And this is a long game. Like, I've spent over 170 hours, 75 hours probably, and I don't see myself stopping to play soon, because not only did Capcom give us a full game at $60 price that still works well, with the exception of a few day one DLCs, which is mostly cosmetic stuff, they're gonna be releasing free monster DLC that'll be updated throughout the year, likely leading to an eventual Monster Hunter World Ultimate Edition, like they've done with previous games in the past. And of course, and the other options you can do is you have like safaris where you can eventually send palicos you meet from other players. And speaking of other players, yeah, you can play them and not just join, but also get their guild cards and view them. And there's mine. And there's other players that I've met, including one right here who's been a frequent guest star, and holy crap, she's high in the rank right now. So yeah, you can send palicos from other people out to get resources. You got a ship captain here. There's so many ways you can go about this game. It's insane. It really is. Now, yeah, the game does have a main story. The main story is you're going from the old world that's been most of the Monster Hunter game settings into a new world, which is basically uncharted, new monsters, including ones that have migrated here. And there's a big Godzilla-sized elder dragon called Zora Magros coming, and you eventually have to deal with him and find out what else is going on after the fact. It's not I wouldn't say it's the deepest story or even the best story ever made, but that's not the point of this game. They kept the story simple. It's still an interesting enough tale, I do admit, and I definitely enjoyed it. But if you're going into this expecting Last of Us or Mass Effect, you're not going to get that. The prime reason this game is what it is, as it has been since the very first Monster Hunter, has always been about the monster hunting. Finding them, fighting them, tracking them, making cool shit out of their remains, and making yourself even better than you were the last time. And that's pretty much the appeal of the series and what's kept it around so long. It's pretty much the kind of game that preys on your sense of reward and accomplishment, and that's what ultimately makes it satisfying and addicting. Now, if it can be a bit of a negative, but the game, because of the game's very nature, it can lead to being somewhat repetitious. You know, having to fight the same monsters over again at some point in order to get the stuff you want. But again, if you play your cards right and choose the right assignments, unlock the right assignments like the investigations, which give you ranked rewards, the gold, silver, and bronze on top of what you get normally, then you're good. You can unlock more stuff. And of course, it also depends on what tier of quest you get. Do you go for the low rank or the high rank? And of course, that'll differ with reward of what type of rewards you get. And yeah, at 175 hours, I'm not disappointed with Monster Hunter World. I've had my bang for my buck, and I'm definitely looking forward to more. And honestly, this is probably Capcom's best game in a long time. They've had a couple of bad years. I mean, Resident Evil 7 I heard was good. I never really got them. I tried Resident Evil 5. I didn't like it. Resident Evil 6 looked abysmal. They had that Devil May Cry reboot they tried to do, which was, again, god-awful. And not to mention all the controversies regarding their fighting games, like Street Fighter 5, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, how they've been dumbing down those games, locking content behind DLC paywalls for content that's already in the disc and should be there. But I guess with this game, they decide to say, you know what, with this franchise that everyone loves and we really don't want to lose, let's not only make another Monster Hunter game, let's finally update it, put it on the main consoles, and not only give the players a full game worth $60, but also give most of the post-game content for free. That's how you do a game like this in the modern setting. Especially today, where we are surrounded by even more and more stupid decisions and greedy corporations that try to milk the games for all it's worth with microtransactions and inanely priced DLC, like what EA did with their Battlefront games as of late. Ugh, what a ruination of a franchise. Hi. Oh, and of course you can buy your supplies, too. And of course, certain weapons you'll have to do that with. Like, the melee weapons, you don't really need to, but for some, like the bows and rifles, you have to either craft or buy your ammunition. You can do both. I personally preferred buying. You can also make bombs. Me, personally, I preferred tranquilizing monsters with a light bow rifle than I ever did with the bombs, because, well, that's just how I preferred it. And, of course, when monsters go to sleep and you find them in their main base, you can, of course, surprise them with a big boom and take more damage out of them. So, there is really no one way you can play the game. You can settle on a specific stratagem, like I do with the glaive, with the occasional mixer-upper, but there's never really one way to play. You can pretty much take whatever weapon you want, do whatever you want, within reason, of course, within their capabilities. And the game does have does have quite the learning curve, even early on. But if you're patient enough and you learn the game enough, maybe even do quests with other people to get more practice, you eventually do get better. And believe me, I have gotten a lot better in a lot of these monsters. So this is a difficult game. This is not a game that's going to be for the instant gratification factor. This one is old-fashioned, and it takes a lot of work and practice to get good with. Get good, as they say these days. There is no training wheels on this except for the early levels, I suppose. And then, of course, there's a day and night and weather cycle, like when you saw when I went to the forest, it was raining. Sometimes it doesn't do that. Sometimes it'll be day, sometimes it'll be night. And in other places like the desert, there's a sandstorm. And speaking of which, the environments in this game are definitely some of the coolest I've ever seen. This one, in particular, is probably one of my favorites, the Coral Highlands. What's so special about it? Well, it's pretty much in the name. It's a coral reef that is on a that is high up in a mountainside area. It's not in a sea. What other game or fantasy fiction can you think of where that's ever happened? I can't think of any. That's probably one of the most original things I've seen in the last few years as far as setting is concerned. And if you think that was all there was in the game in terms of the game's content, well, you'd be wrong. There's also a gallery in the main menu where it has all the cutscenes that once that unlocked are viewable, And if you choose your profile that you're using as it is, as you have it, it will be featured in the cutscenes with the armor and weapons you have attached. Now, see what I mean? Look at this. What other game can you find a coral reef that's not under the sea with jellyfish flying in the air using the air instead of water? This is definitely uniqueness in and of itself, and I love it. I mean, you could just stare at this for hours. And there are times where, hell, you even go and sit in your tent, and the character will actually, you know, do stuff. You can, yeah, in the tents you can recharge automatically, of course. And see, they if you leave the game alone, the characters goof off. They do stuff. They don't just sit around idly, and I love that. It's the little things in this game that ultimately give it its extra charm. And when major gameplay, you don't just have your attacks, but you can also, but here, down here, you use your main stuff, your whetstone to recharge your blades whenever they wear down, your potions, gadgetry for your crossbow on the arm, which is your main, I guess you could say your main default tool, which allows you to shoot stuff at monsters that you find out in the field or you bring with you. And every weapon has a different ability that built into it that ultimately makes them unique. And what I really love about the monsters themselves is how mix of fantastical and realistic they are. Like, when I first saw footage of Monster Hunter game being played by a counselor when I was in orchestra camp years ago, I noticed hadrosaurs, and I'm like, "What game are you playing?" And he's like, "Monster Hunter." And since then, I've been wanting to get into it now, and now I have. So, yeah, dinosaurs and monsters, all in this, and in Sweet, in a game with anime-ish Japan characters. I mean, who wouldn't like that? I certainly did. Yeah, so pretty much, I have mostly nothing but positives for Monster Hunter World. It's definitely fun. It has a lot of content to keep going forward and keep playing even after you complete the main story. Really, most of my problems are really minor or nitpicky. Like, again, I mentioned the frame rate at a distance. The difficulty, of course, can be spine-tinglingly, mind-shatteringly insane, depending on what you have and how much power you up in the game. And some monsters definitely do have a learning curve, like the main Elder Dragon, Nergigante. He took a long time for me to get good at. It was only thanks to playing with co-op that I was able to get better with him, but now I'm able to do him quite better than before. And for the most part, the game is satisfactory. And with free DLC coming, there's definitely going to be more incentive to come back and play it. And so this is one of the few games, especially from Capcom nowadays, where you get a full package that's worth the replay value and rewards. Now, speaking of repetition, for all the glowing reviews the game has gotten, it's not gone by without some criticism. Of which there's room for, I admit. Again, the frame rate. Oh, and probably one thing that I've repeatedly commented on, the lip-syncing. Yeah, for whatever reason, they did not lip-sync the English dub dialogue very well. They're all speaking in their Japanese. When they speak in the when all the characters speak in the cutscenes, their lips don't match. It's like they're programmed to speak only the Japanese, but the languages coming out is completely different. So why they didn't do that like they normally would with every other game, like the Devil May Cry games and so on, kind of baffles me. It's like, it kind of takes me out of it, you know what I mean? And of course the loading times can be ungodly long at times. There was one other thing that came to mind. Can't remember what it is. It'll probably come back to me. However, if there's one complaint that I've heard in regards to the game that is not very fair, it's that it's too repetitive. All you do is hunt a monster, accept the quest, hunt another monster, accept the quest, hunt another monster, rinse, repeat. Well, to that I say, what the fuck kind of game were you expecting? It literally tells you right there in the title, Monster Hunter. That's the game's premise and has been since the very first game. You're not playing freaking Dragon Age, you're not playing Mass Effect, you're not playing Legend of Zelda, you're playing a game where your central premise is to go out and hunt giant monsters. So complaining about that is like complaining about racing in a racing game. Like, what do you expect? It's pretty much an erroneous complaint, honestly. Like, if you're gonna complain about anything in Monster Hunter World at least have a complaint that is legitimate, like the lip syncing or the long loading times. Oh, I just remembered. Yeah, there is one other thing that kind of does get a bit on my nerves in regards to the story and world building of Monster Hunter World. Most of, if not all of the characters don't actually have names. They all refer to them by rank and job title. No, I'm sorry, but if you want me to get invested in a universe like this, you can't just refer to characters by title and rank. I mean, their personalities are colorful. I love a lot of them. But if I don't have a name to attach them to, then it's not really connecting, you know what I mean? I mean, with the main character, I get it. Your main hunter character, that's acceptable, because this game is crafted around inserting your own character as you want him or her to be, and investing yourself in. But when it comes to all the other characters, like the handler, who's your main partner throughout the game, who supplies you with all the stuff, the cook, or even the base commander, that's where I kind of have a bit of an issue, because you want me to get invested, but they don't have names for me to connect them to, so it doesn't really help much. Oh, and also you can customize your cat too, by the way, at the beginning of the game, aside your main hunter character. As you can see, I went for like a Siamese look, and I also gave him his or her own name, Vic, in reference to my parents' old Siamese before I was born. So you not only can make your own hunter the way you want, but you can make your own Palico cat assistant the way you want. So that's, yeah, options aplenty. I mean, admittedly, the game can feel repetitive if you're going after the same monster over and over again. But at the end of the day, you're pretty much complaining about something the game was always meant to be about. Every Monster Hunter game, to my knowledge, has always been like this. You go out, track monsters, find monsters, fight different monsters, find even more powerful monsters, and get even more powerful shit to craft out of them. The game is like Diablo and Borderlands, is basically based around that concept, even right down to its very name. So again, if you're gonna complain about the game, at least have something legitimate to complain about, other than the central premise Because if you're going into this, because again, like I said, if you're going into this game expecting a heavy story-based game with stuff to do like dialogue and whatnot, you're not getting that. You're getting a game where it's pretty much fixed on a central premise, but with a surprising amount of different ways of doing it. So I really don't get that complaint at all. If anything, it's one that's not fair to this particular series, since it's pretty much built itself around that to varying degrees. Yeah, I'll go back to my room. So, yeah, that's pretty much the gist of everything in this game. And I really enjoy it. If you're a veteran... Now, if you're a new player, a newcomer to Monster Hunter, like I am, or at least have been very much wanting to get into the game, but haven't been able to, this is your chance to do it. It really is. And I hope that Capcom will make another main console Monster Hunter game, hopefully in the near future, and not take a million years in the process with only handheld, because I've waited so long for another mainstream console Monster Hunter game to come out, and they finally did with this one. I'm very pleased with it. I hope to see another game soon. New lands to explore, new creatures to find, and it's definitely one I think is well worth everyone's time, not just for new fans, but even old fans. From what I've seen, the game appeals to both phenomenally well. It doesn't alienate either group, which is a rare thing to happen, especially these days, where you have one side where developers will be very meticulous in regards to the old guard of gamers, while another side will do anything possible to overly streamline it and simplify it to the point that it's just not fun, like Call of Duty, like all the Call of Duty games and whatnot. And honestly, and speaking of shooting games, yeah, Destiny doesn't have shit on this game. Whereas Destiny, you pretty much shoot at the same immobile bullet sponge enemies and bosses for like hours, hoping for loot that you want to randomly come up, but with no way of really having an organized way of doing it. In this game, all the bosses are varied. They all move differently. They all act differently. You have a huge variety of weapons that trounces even that game. And it has probably one of the more efficient reward systems because of how tiered it is. You want certain parts from a monster, you have to attack those parts, certain parts of a monster. You have the investigations, which I mentioned, which have the added gold, silver, and bronze ranked rewards, which add even more chances to unlock parts you really need. And of course, once you do that enough and you go and unlock it, you're pretty much set for life. You don't have to go attacking a giant gate lord or whatever the hell for a million years, hoping that the thing you want will come to you, despite being extremely simplistic to the point of not really being rewarding at all. So, compared to other games that are loot heavy, like Destiny, Monster Hunter does it far better, and is honestly a much more fun game by extension. So if you want a game that definitely rewards you for your hard work and time, and is fair about it for the most part, and is fairly challenging, and has multiplayer that for the most part works fairly well and isn't intrusive at all, it's definitely one that I can recommend highly. And you can play the whole game in single player, like I mostly did, but there were times where I did occasionally go ask for help, and for the most part, the multiplayer works pretty good. And you can play it That way, anyway, pretty much either single player or multiplayer. The only drawback to it is that you have to do is that if you're gonna do a main assignment quest, you know, which is the story-centric ones, you can only do it with players who are either on the same time of the game as you, where you can both play it, or play with a player who's already done it. You can't do it main assignments with a player who's many levels behind, because then they'd be jumping into further into the story without them even supposed to be doing that. So yeah, it's not really a flaw, but it's basically, what can you do to maintain balance in player and who plays where, you know what I mean? But for the most part, it works, and works well, and you're not limited to either one or the other. And other than a few technical complaints, the game is well worth its money. Very high amounts of replayability with different monsters and weapons and armor suits to find and unlock. All those other stuff you can find throughout the world, and the attention to detail. It's insane. And being the first game of 2018 that I've delved into, this is one that I can confidently say already is Game of the Year contender. And I hope Capcom makes another Monster Hunter game for PS4 soon, because I really don't want to go through another decade of seeing them released everywhere else on systems I don't have or have any interest in. And I definitely hope to see more of it. And so, yeah, that other than a few technical gripes, the game is top tier quality, and this is basically what AAA should be, not what we've had for the last several years. And I can't recommend it highly enough. So yeah, that's Monster Hunter World. I love the game. I highly recommend the game. Go out and buy it now if you wish. And definitely support it if you like a good game with as much depth and creativity as this does. It does have a few flaws, like I mentioned, like the lack of names on characters, the lip syncing, and it can be overly difficult at times, but for the most part, well worth the $60. And if you're a newcomer to the series like I am, you're definitely gonna be in for a treat. And even old fans should be pleased with it as well. From what I've heard, a lot of them are, which is good. So, one of the few times where a new game doesn't alienate anyone on either side of the spectrum and finds a good balance. And, yeah. That's pretty much all I have for my review. Again, I'm Metal Levi Alex. If you've been watching my gameplay since the beginning, or at least whatever parts you're able to, thank you. And for those who do eventually see this review and the other parts of the game, and I will be playing more of the game as more stuff comes out, and in fact, I got another assignment to do post-story to do anyways, which I may do. Aw, she's petting the hair. Nice. See what I mean? The little stuff. But yeah, like, share, and subscribe if you really liked my gameplay and in this or the review, and you want to see more. Definitely share. And for those who are watching this for the first time, definitely subscribe if you haven't yet. And I will definitely be bringing more of Monster Hunter World even after this to my channel. And of course, I'll be finally going on to play other games too. now I finally got this one for the most part over and done with, which, well, by mostly, since I'm still gonna come back and play the new levels and new monsters that come out post-launch. And, yeah, like, share, subscribe, and definitely comment once the videos are up. And I appreciate whatever feedback you may give me. And, yeah, that's it. That is my review of Monster Hunter World. Definitely check out previous parts of the game if you haven't already. And if you wish, playthroughs of other games I've played. And I will be bringing more fun to come. So, yeah. Monster Hunter World, buy it, recommend it, go get it, and I'll be definitely be bringing more of this game over the next year or so, and hopefully more titles come out for the PS4, and that'll be it, and yep, that's it for now. Good night, everyone. God bless. I love this game. I hope y'all love it too. Peace out.